Hello, guys. Hello, we are back, and Ruby is here.
We made it. How are
Thank
you?
you so much. Oh yeah, we
Good
finally made it.
evening.
How you doing today, Ruby?
I'm good. Good evening. Happy weekend. Happy Friday.
Happy week.
Yes, end of the week.
Oh
Good
yeah,
evening to everybody that's joined. How are you?
I'm
I'm
doing
doing
good. I'm
well.
doing good. We had some difficulties, so I just I cut off the call, then rejoin again. So maybe you may wait for some minutes for folks to join.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. Um, how's the weather in Ottawa?
Ottawa is good. Ottawa is good. We have. I feel like we are in winter already.
I'm still in winter, even though it's spring. It's getting nice outside. It's sunny, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
still a bit cold. Yeah, it's still a bit breezy in Toronto, for me at least. My son he loves the winter, so
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It feels summer with the sun
yes,
and the weather, you know.
we, yes, I'm a summer child.
So, yeah.
And we have I see University of South Florida,
Oh
Cassie.
wow.
Yes,
Thank you.
from the Religious Studies Department. Good evening to everyone. I'm excited to be here and
Definitely,
meet
I am.
everybody in the community across the country.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining. Thank you, Dorica. Thank you, Hiba, um, Level Up. Thank you so much, Roshan. Thank you, Olzaz. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. And maybe we can start while we're waiting for the people to join us. Thank you so much, Ruby. For those who doesn't know Ruby, maybe a quick introduction. She's an executive board member of Born Too White, and I will leave to her to introduce herself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ruben, for putting this together. I'm Ruby Vinodini Ratnasingam. A little bit about me. Where do I start? Outside of have albinism, I'm Tamil Canadian. I was born in Sri Lanka, in a northern part in Colombo in the city, and then moved during the Civil War up north. Immigrated to Canada when I was, gosh, in the late 80s, when I was 9 years old. And sort of went through the process of life growing up with albinism in Canada. Many of our newcomers are going to go through or are going through. So it's been quite a journey. I never thought I'd be here. Find myself here. I was quite thrilled to find out there was an organization as I turned 40 in the year of 2020. Is that when you were established, correct? Right, International Awareness Day for Albinism. Yes.
Yes.
So when you called me, we connected, and I thought this is just great. I was in the process of hoping to change statistics for legally blind children in the school system. Typically, the statistics are that we are mostly unemployed, 80% of us, so, right? So it's important. That's why a lot of us have brought our children here for human rights, to be able to enjoy freedom and human rights. My parents were much the same, immigrated here for various reasons, for civil war, so for freedom. And then if I was lucky enough, I would be one of the 20%, and that was my opportunity. So I got through the education system, and as you know, I'm celebrating today. Some changes with the inclusion of people with albinism who are not naturally by that fact legally blind. So we don't go through the school system, the public school system, the regular. So It was really nice to see inclusion. It's been a long journey. There's been a lot of tremendous support internationally, locally. So it's really great that it feels good. Kudos to you. You did the same within the Ottawa District School Board. So it's just really amazing to see it change, like Ontario changing to be inclusive. And so that's why, like, every single child in our organization, and thank you to everybody who's joined, has a family member who has albinism, child, youth, family, adult. And so by default, we are all legally blind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when the statistics is so grim, I just saw an opportunity to have a voice. I was impressed that it started in the capital. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
That's my story. I came to Canada, got through the school system, became an early childhood educator, social service worker, a lot of just passion in social justice. And I've been with the school board for 12 years in child development. We run a vision program. And so, there's not many of us with this condition, but there's enough to have an organization and a need for support.
yeah,
And, we are just one more, a very the severest of disabilities, and really, right?
yeah,
As I think it was Sam, as Sam was mentioning, there's a lot of anybody with a disability has challenges. It's tough
yeah,
wherever you are in the world. And the statistics, we've talked about other countries are even more tragic, like Tanzania, where there's a cost of freedom for being born with albinism.
yeah,
And so we live in such an amazing country. My parents brought me here for an opportunity. I'm in education. My father was in education. My mother was she was raised by a teacher to the legally blind. So I think I had a voice. I don't think, our paths crossed for any other reason than for purpose. So I think it's really nice to see. And here I am.
oh yeah,
That's a little bit about me. A little bit about me. I have a great son who I think is listening. So he's 13. He's got a mom with albinism, and so we talk quite a lot about, understanding all the challenges that comes with there, and that's understanding diversity, inclusion, equity, and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
oh
So
yeah,
here I am.
yeah. Thank you so much. I always feel like you given the experiences that you've experienced, and of course what you've accomplished. You set an example to so many either newcomer or young kids with albinism who are growing up with albinism. And maybe I may ask you a quick question. One thing for sure, Canadians are very welcoming, but the system within Canada, I don't think it welcomes all people as much as we want it to function. And maybe a question to you, Ruby. Do you think that, like, the need of advocacy for either children or kids with albinism, be it at school or at work, how hard can we push this tool advocacy for people with albinism?
I think this is something that I hope, especially children growing up with albinism, take away from this. There's a lot of stigma. And so that how we are perceived, how we are regarded has a huge influence in our self-esteem, self-confidence. Anyone in early child development, it's important. So I think one thing I would take away from that is that we have an opportunity. There is definitely challenges in the system. There's Bob Rumble for the school of if you're deaf and blind, and that's imperative that we have third-party organizations that are there to support and can provide the needed supports to get children through education to become employable. I, for one, was fortunate enough my parents came to Canada and they put me in a regular public school system, when we were working with the Ottawa District School Board recently. And so a third party was involved. They came in, they provided the support. So I went through there was accommodations made within the regular classroom. And so I was able to, and so those accommodations require a level of understanding and awareness about albinism, because we fall on, most of us, as myself, who have oculocutaneous albinism, OAC, we can, we still function. And so we just have vision, so our sight, but we are borderline. So we are legally blind under Canadian bylaws, which is, I think, 200/20 is the line of the number. Medical numbers. So we have a great opportunity to get through public school system and be employable. There's so many of us here. I mean, we've discussed it. There's people in IT with albinism who are by default legally blind. So the legally blind community, that statistic of 20% can be so much higher. That means every single one of our children have an opportunity to go through that system. So when you ask me how far can we go with advocacy, you know, we must go. If we have hope to have our children be able to have jobs, be contributing citizens, come for the freedom that we, you know, many of us sought to be able to do in this country, which is to have jobs and contribute and be employable. So if 80% of us are not, statistically, we as people, persons with albinism, because it's sort of, it's like a two-way. I find it funny because we are all legally blind, but then we can all actually go through that system that you said that we often fail. So it requires advocacy. It requires, there's recently Iraq Panwilsa, who is the independent expert for the UN, and her position's coming up, and she's done some great reports on, the challenges and barriers of people with albinism, and the life expectancy of people with albinism is, I was shocked. I remember hearing a friend of mine saying it in grade 9, and I said, no, that's not true. It was something around, the life expectancy is 40 years old. It's quite grim for various factors, right? Whatever form of discrimination they face throughout the world. As social workers, especially, I think we have a duty as part of our, we all have causes. This happens to be one of my many. So I think we have a duty to advocate, because it's social assistance is awesome, and we live in a country that provides that and takes care of persons who are unemployed. But that we have aspirations. We have children who want to go to school. And that requires a lot of policy change. It requires a lot of advocacy. And it starts with a lot of education and awareness. I know we're working really hard to make some recommendations, but it also requires a level of communication between boards, between organizations, to make that awareness so that kids can be, the idea of inclusion and a barrier-free Ontario is that we include all persons. Regardless of abilities, and so the legally blind is just a few of us in the Ontario population, but if you're with albinism like me, you're all of us. So it's quite important as an organization.
Thank you so much, Ruby, and maybe getting to tell us what is your contribution to the albinism community, given that you've achieved all that you've achieved.
I had, you saw if anyone's been watching my social media this morning, I took the day off. There are so many people that supported me. I've had a great mentor who's a principal and who in the Toronto District School Board, who really walked me through this process of, my idea was that people with albinism, people who are legally blind, can be employable, and we can get work and make great strides. We have some people now entering the medical system, becoming surgeons, and we have people becoming, I think there's recently, you said, in IT, in Apple, in great corporations. So we have so many talents, so many abilities And there's a lot of work to do. This is definitely, I'm a believer in God and faith
Yeah.
and tenacity to hang on.
Yeah.
So I think we have a purpose, and I think coming to Canada as young as I did, coming with the ability to have language. Recently, Miss Ero spoke about that, about the ability to communicate, and so I think the way to pass awareness and education is through communication and
Yeah.
understanding. So how can you
Yes.
learn? And we need to start in our own communities, educating our own communities about discrimination, about how we see people. And so that builds our children's confidence.
Yes.
And that's not something that's, parenting begins at home. So I think that's the important thing. So I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think this is, it's definitely a celebration. So it's all of the parents and families and communities that we serve, really. There's so much work to do. And I think this is, a huge stride to make presence, to say that our kids can get through school, our youth can be a part of all activities in school, our adults can be contributing citizens in all areas of professions. And that's the Canadian opportunity, right? So I think being in education, being in social work, it's just one of many things that I felt a calling to do. So it's definitely a good weekend, sir.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. I should look at some charts here. Um,
Yes.
I have Dorcas saying duty to advocate. Definitely, we have a duty to advocate for individuals with albinism. And Beverly is saying even
Hi,
one.
Beverly.
He's saying even one is enough for change. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Uh,
100%, 100%.
uh, then someone is saying amazing work. Keep up the good fight for change, Ruby. You're amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And maybe Ruby, do you think maybe your community, given that you came to Canada when you were a little girl and grew up in Canada, your immigration journey and your community, do you think they ever play a role to your success today?
100%. I think without them, that is what community is, right? It takes a village. We know the saying, it
Yeah.
takes a village to raise a child. And I grew up, it's so funny because I was talking to my family and I was thinking about, like, I was spending a lot of time thinking about, this process of how I got here and like what, how do I, want to children and youth and families. And my family was definitely, but it's almost to the point where it's funny. They were supportive, but they were supportive because they were so inclusive. I was just a sister, and I was just a daughter, and I was just a cousin like everybody else. So I think that is inclusion. And I grew up with a great support system. Again, I was fortunate and blessed. My father is in education, so he was always, he guided the value, and all my cousins and my father's side, they're in medicine and things like that. So I think I had a liking for knowledge and wanting to figure things out and understand your condition, and that's what awareness is.
Yeah.
And my mom would say, whereas back home, my mom would say when she was born, like, even the medical practitioners did not know how to explain. It was the nurse who actually informed her and told her what the condition was. And so there's information that needs to be given. It goes back to all the way to Tanzania where, we are looked at as rituals, money rituals, right?
Yeah.
And that's a perception change. So I think I was quite fortunate. At community is important. When I grew up here, I'm going to say my first best friend in Canada, she goes by Persian Queen on social media. I was chatting with her, and she was my first, friend in Canada, and she saw me no different. We were free to be how we were. there was no, and I think that is, you know, I've always, it's the people that build the community that builds your confidence, the community, because I think we're lucky. We're in Canada where it's our disabilities are not our disabilities. We have so many different abilities. I tell one of my biggest journey learnings out of this, and I hope children find this, is that we're often, you know, taught, we live in a very visual world.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, you know, our perception on how we see the world, how we navigate the world, and how we navigate the system is seen as a disability. And that's the stigma. And for me, I've always grown up like, no, you know, we have vision impairments that make us are considered legally blind, but we kind of navigate the world differently. And so that is a great strength, right? So that's
Yeah.
a great strength. That's not your disability. But in a visual world where 90% of the world, or how many ever are sighted, that is the norm. So I think confidence comes in knowing that you just have different abilities, and not, you know, feeling. I remember growing up, CNIB was a huge, huge part of my involvement. They were quite, until high school, quite advocate, you know, made a great deal of effort to advocate for me, part of their programs. Gosh, they were a great deal. If you're a part of, if you haven't found them yet, there's a number of organizations, ours included. We're hoping to do many, many programs to come to I think encourage independence. My community of family were that was the one thing whether they intentionally did it, or I you know, just was confident enough to live my life.
Yeah.
My mom was, you know, my mom for quite a while was a single mom while we were going through Civil War. She was an independent woman herself. She was a businesswoman herself. So independence just kind of grew in us. We survived Civil War, so it's, you know, when you ran, everybody ran. It didn't matter what kind of disability ability you had, right? So I think survival. So I think I was looked on as included as everybody else. You know, my brother and I got along and argued, and like every other sibling did. So I think that's the important thing, is as long as you teach your children and build the confidence in them
Yeah.
to be who they are, which is something I did. I think I do believe without my family and community and supports, whether it was, I had some great guidance counselors in TDSB. I grew up in Scarborough, Toronto raised. So there were some great supports, guidance counselors who guided my path and what my abilities, you know, where my strengths were. And so, you know, not everything is guided by your vision. That's actually the last. We're all essentially, we're all legally blind. That's the last sense for us to develop when we're born,
Yeah.
according to child development. So we're all blind.
Yeah.
So some of us just have enhanced senses. My mom would say things like, I remember I would just have heightened hearing. They would hate it. So I would just hear everything. And so, you know, and so there's little tricks and trades. And so I think it's always about, I was always given the confidence by my parents because education and employability and access to education was important. That you had that ability to have education access and become employable. So I think independence was the number one key that my community gave me. And so that requires support. So definitely.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much. And we have one question from the viewer here. He's,
Yes.
let me just put the question. You are inspirational, Ruby. What can we do to support you?
Good Lord, support Born Too White Ottawa. You know, I think there's a lot of awareness where I would say that I sit on quite a few boards, quite a few organizations. I have quite a few passions in the work that I do. In terms of working with persons with albinism, it's quite a personal issue, of course. So I think I would say support the organization however you can, and spread the word, spread awareness. It's important in the sense that we are part of the legally blind community in Ontario, in Canada, wherever province you are. We do not currently have a way to identify ourselves. If you're legally blind, we don't drive, so we don't have a license. So how do you show? So some ministries they recognize CNIB as your ID card in order for services and supports. There has been a big call out for provinces, because it's independent of each province how they identify. So there has been a call out for identification cards, because Ontario has a purple card, that ID card, and the provincial ID card if you don't drive, but that doesn't say, it tells the other person that you're blind. And so, CNIB usually, if you Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of in Toronto, it's TTC. They recognize it in order to get free access to transportation, access to transportation. Support advancement of technology. In the States, I believe some of people with albinism have an opportunity to drive. Support technology. If you're in IT, I see some people out there who are in IT and building technology. Support education, support access to education, support barrier-free provisions in your load ridings, support advancement in technology. That alone, if you're blind, there's no correction for us, but technology can advance so much that we can drive in some countries, and that is independence. Those are, certainly things that are important. I just remember my heart breaking. I was talking to a friend earlier this week, and I said, I went to get 16. I knew my car. I knew what I was going to buy. It was going to be a Jeep. I went over there. They said, you can't pass the eye exam. I went, oh. And I went, laser surgery. Technology was advancing, so the laser surgery came along. It doesn't work for, medically, it doesn't work for us. Technology is something that I think that's important to get that statistic, the Canadian statistics, which is, in 2021 we're in, and where diversity, inclusion, equity has been such a highlight in the province, and yet the employability statistics of people legally blind Canadians, it means 80% of us are not able to have two vital things in life, and that's a purpose to wake up to, and the ability to contribute to society. I met a very great gentleman. He's in British Columbia, who's an retired RCMP officer, and I remember we were having this conversation. He said, about the suicide rate in Canada, the opioid crisis, and on and on. And he said, the two things that are important for every human being is that you have a purpose to wake up to, and a reason to wake up, a purpose in life, and the ability to contribute to society, which is why we go to school, get educated, start whatever it is that we pursue to contribute back into society and afford life. And so, yeah. So,
and thank you so much for the insights. Getting everyone on the board, then even kids with albinism, they can have that meaningful life of serving their communities and things. Oh yeah, thank you.
Whatever they want to do, exactly.
Yeah, our last part of the question is, given that you've been again here for a number of years, and you came in when you were 8 years old, what resources do you think youth, families, and people with albinism should maximize, be it to access education, to access employment, and other things?
In this process, and I'll be quite honest, and it's one of the reasons, as excited as I was for the position of Ikpenwusa's position coming up to support people with albinism globally, there was a lot of work to be said. Sorry, there's a lot of work to be done in Canada. I still feel is important. In this process, so I said, I was quite fortunate that I didn't feel discriminated against. I had this amazing opportunity, and so I think when you're given that platform, you need to use it. You need to speak. So I hope to do that. Along the way, I was in a position where I was identifying myself as a person with albinism, and it gave me an opportunity to also become a platform and a voice. And I saw an open door to change a system. And had immense support through my union, through the board, through community. So I thought, you just need someone to speak. And what better way than organizations as us, right? Give this voice. So if I could say one takeaway from this process, get supports out there, whether, for me, it was Canadian National Institute for the Blind. It's the most recognized nationally, but there's so many organizations supporting Born Too White. In Ottawa right now, there's so many organizations, youth organizations, community organizations. Your access to independence is key, and that is the opportunity that is so important. Your ophthalmologist will become your best friend. They are the medical practitioner, I've learned throughout this process of identification, because we currently don't have an identification process to be inclusive. Unless companies are already inclusive, that requires, thirdly, I would say there really needs to be training in corporations in terms of legally blind. The vision impairments of persons with albinisms are far different. We do have a medical condition, but a starter would be definitely legally blind organizations to come in and if we're talking about an Ontario, barrier-free Ontario, from the top down, we need to have knowledge. And education. And so what I would say is that starts at home. The first thing I knew when I came to Canada and I realized what my condition was when I was young enough to realize it, and technology was accessible, I just learned everything about it. There's supports, what I would say is ADP, there's assistive devices programs, check it, use services that will help. It is quite costly for anybody with a disability to afford life, to have accommodations. There's so many supports out there. There's ADP, which provides 75% of to have access to technology and accommodation and aids. CNIB organizations provide government funding. These are the programs that got me through how do you drive yourself to school? Well, there was funding out there. I got to school. And so this was access to education, but that starts at awareness and education system. So so parents need to speak up for their children, advocate for your kids. Kids need to learn to advocate for themselves. And in order to do that, we need to, get community supports at the local level, at the government level, at a technology level, and an organizational level. So, if you're a part of the community, the albinism community, go out and take a look. Just start asking, getting in touch with your social worker, your community social worker. There's supports out there. They'll access you resources. If you're, wanting to support the albinism community, local politicians, there's a call out for identification. There's a call out. When you ID yourself, be proud in your identity. When you ID yourself, policy can change so much that allows an open door for inclusion and access and equity. So all of us can be employable, and that 80% can be 100, all of us, or that 20% can be 100, right? All of us. So that's what I would say. Use all the services. If you came for an opportunity in Canada, it's there. Use it, make access, use it. There's organizations like us that are doing things, for free, for community. So free is key. Access and then speak your voice. That's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ruby. I know we are like 5 minutes left, but
Yeah.
one that I want to add, like we're planning to have a virtual gatherings for the June 13th. It's Albinism Awareness Day. Well, and I think I've just forgot the theme of this year. I got a theme of this year, but I just forgot it. And we'll be sharing it on our social media. So I think this being our first albinism awareness year or gathering, this will be a good place to like first meet people and build the connections from there. Born to White, we are planning to do as much outreach to all communities across Canada, try to connect to as many people as possible and have the day celebrate together. Thank you so much, guys. And maybe Ruby, if you have any last thoughts.
No, thank you for the opportunity to platform just our organization. Thank you for the chat with me. Thank you for celebrating with me. I called this date night on my Friday night in Toronto. So as the sun goes down, just about now in Toronto, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for, just hearing the voices of such some amazing things that the organization's doing. Ottawa, the capital, changing policy for inclusion, Toronto District School Board, changing policy directives. So we still have a lot of work to do. We still have to make policy change. We still need to be identified in a way that inclusion is, for Ontario, is accessible to every single person in Ontario. So, and that's, for someone as myself, I would say, we have so many programs that we'd like funded. We're working on it. We're going to be
Yeah,
doing some fundraising events. Please support that. If you'd
yeah,
like to support programs for youth in our community across the nation, really, we've got families from everywhere.
yeah,
Make a push for your local government to really find out, what are they doing to actually support and barrier-free Ontario? What does that
yeah.
look like, and what are they actually doing in the education system, in the social
Yeah.
justice system? Ask, because there's, we have seen what the race, there's a lot of opportunity, but we've seen what race and discrimination has done across the border. It's
Mhm.
brought to light so many issues of humanity and human rights.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be holding government policy, communities, ourselves accountable
Yeah.
for our future. And so I will leave with that as I go celebrate. Thank you, everyone, so much. I had a great
Oh,
time.
definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And I wish you nice and wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.